This morning, I'll create a roadmap for you on healing. But then tomorrow and this afternoon, I have a very interesting person. We have Dr. Rob Knight, who's probably the world's biggest authority on the microbiome. So we'll be talking about that. And then tomorrow morning, I'm hoping to cover You Are the Universe. And that will be a little challenging, but let's give us all an opportunity to understand why we are the universe. And then tomorrow afternoon, we'll be back to something with Mark Hyman on nutrition. So why don't we start with the video, the conception to birth, okay? So I want you to see this video. This is how everyone in this room started out this time around. There are a few things that just by watching that video should become very clear to you. You might want to write these down, okay? How many, by the way, how many people are attending a course here for the first time? Okay. So then a lot of the stuff I'm going to say to you this morning is going to be very new. So just by watching that video, there are few principles I'd like you to jot down right now and understand them. These principles are, number one, self-organizing. Number two, self-regulating. Number three, self-evolving. Number four, recursive. I'll explain all these principles. Number five, I did say self-evolving? Okay, so number four, recursive. Number five, complementarity. Number six, creative interactivity. And number seven, spontaneous. Spontaneous and effortless. Okay. So actually, Renee, can you jot these down? Because I never said this before and I might forget. Okay, okay. So let's go over these principles, each in turn. What do we mean by the self? Because the word is self-organizing, right? So self, as understood here, is consciousness or awareness. So our core being, our essential being is what we call the self. And the self is the same as awareness. Awareness or consciousness. So that awareness or self or consciousness, it organizes itself into what we call experience. It organizes itself into experience. So right now you're having an experience. You're experiencing this room, you're experiencing me, you're experiencing each other, you're experiencing what we call the furniture, etc. What is experiencing that? You as consciousness, you as awareness. Now tomorrow I'm going to go into much further detail in how you, the self, organizes itself as the experience of the entire universe. But for now we'll just talk about the self or consciousness or awareness. For those of you who would like to use the word soul or spirit, that's fine. But you know, when we use words soul and spirit, then scientists get a little upset because they don't like these words, but it's the same thing, okay? Self, soul, spirit, consciousness, awareness. That's our essential nature. And it organizes itself into experience. What kind of experience? Well, one is what we call perceptual experience. We can experience the world. We also experience our own body. We also experience other people. We experience the environment. We experience the universe ultimately. But who's the we that's doing it? It's our core being, or spirit, or soul, Won't go into the difference between spirit and soul. Later, maybe Dr. Suhas can go over that, or maybe I can if we have the time. Okay, so self-organization. The self is organizing itself into what we see as a human being in this particular video. Self-regulating, you saw that every step of the way was precisely timed. You saw that one sentence which says if the fetus continued to grow at this rate, it would be 1.5 tons by the time it came out. Well, it would never have a chance, right? So it's self-regulating. Self-regulating. There are pauses, there are stops, there's a punctuation to that process. Third was self-evolving. As that fetus goes from being a little fertilized ovum to a fully developed baby, actually it remembers all of evolution. All of evolution. So in the beginning you look like a bacterium, then you look like a reptile, then you look like a mammal, then you look like a monkey, and finally you look like a human being. All that happens in the 9 months of the self, the spirit, the soul, the consciousness, the awareness, which are preferable words, okay, because they don't have any religious connotations. Awareness. By the time it emerges as a human, it remembers all of evolution. Okay, this is a phrase that sometimes in science we say, phylogeny. Phylogeny repeats ontogeny. Phylogeny means the appearance. Ontogeny means the source. So, human beings have existed on this planet for only, according to modern science. And there are limitations to what we can know from science. But according to modern science, human beings have existed less than 100,000 years. But life on this planet has existed for almost 3 billion years. Life started as microorganisms on the rims of volcanoes. The first organisms were called chemolitho-autotrophic hyperthermophiles. Long word. Chemo means chemicals. Autotrophic, they were self-reproducing. Hyperthermophiles, they lived on the rims of volcanoes and therefore were obviously thriving in volcanic high temperatures. So from bacteria, plants evolved, and then animals, and then animals from reptiles to mammals to primates to us. So somehow there's a memory of that in your genes. Okay. We have no idea how that memory is coded, or if it's even in the genes. It's not probably in the genes. In fact, it is not in the genes. It's in awareness, it's in the spirit, it's in the consciousness. So, self-evolving. There are about 23,000 genes that make up a human being. 23,000. What's a gene? A gene is a stretch of DNA. A stretch of DNA that codes for a unit of hereditary, or we can say a protein. So proteins are the building blocks of life, and proteins include enzymes. So from those proteins, the enzymes, they carve out everything that we need for our body, including carbs and fats and everything else. But that's how life starts. So once again, a gene is a stretch of DNA that codes for a unit of heredity. And we have 23,000 genes, half from our mother and half from our father. But I just said that's a stretch of DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. You don't have to remember all this. just feel like sharing. So, okay, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and these are nucleotides or chemical bases. And again, the names are adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine. Again, you don't have to remember, but you can say the alphabet of life is A, T, C, G. 4 letters. That's all of life, whether it's a banana or mango or a strawberry, fungus, not fungus. Fungus has different kind of alphabets, so it doesn't have them. Sorry, delete that. So all of life, living organisms, have only 4 letters. Animals, plants, bacteria, everything. In the English language, we use 26 letters, but life uses only 4 letters. It's the arrangement of those letters. So think of DNA as the letters and genes as the words, and your body as the story. Right? We use letters to form words, and then we use words to form sentences, and then we use sentences to form paragraphs, and then chapters, and then stories, and epics. So your body is an epical, a story that is an epic. Because first of all, it remembers all of life since the beginning of life on this planet. But then if you look at those alphabets, A, T, C, and G, of course they are composed of atoms. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, which is about 96% of all the atoms in your body. But if you add 2 more, sulfur and phosphorus, and maybe 3 more, calcium, that's 99% of your body. Okay, it's just that. You want to remember that? CHON, C-H-O-N, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and then add sulfur, calcium, and phosphorus. That's 99% of your body. The rest is the remaining elements of the periodic table. So where did these come from? These came from the crucible of burning stars. So the carbon in your fingernails and the oxygen going to your brain, they may have come from 2 different galaxies. As of today, even since I wrote my last book, scientists believe there are 2.2 trillion galaxies in the universe. 700 sextillion stars. You can't even count. Okay. And trillions and trillions and trillions of planets. In fact, just 2 months ago, scientists claimed that they discovered a solar system which is only 30 light years away from us, close by, and it has 7 planets. That's a pretty big deal. So trillions of planets, but your body was a conspiracy of the total universe. The carbon, the hydrogen could have come from any one of these galaxies. In fact, your body is a composite of the total universe. So when we say you are the universe, it's not metaphorical. You are the universe. Okay, so self-evolving. The memory is there in consciousness or awareness. 4th principle, recursive. Recursive means it repeats previous patterns even as it evolves into new patterns. So even as you evolve into new form and new phenomena, you still remember the past. You include and transcend. Include means you learn from what was there before. You're not victimized, I hope, by what happened before. Just remember what is, and then you say, what's next? Okay, so you not only remember, you include and you transcend. Include, it's there, but next step. So that's what we mean by recursive. Actually, we should turn the sequence around. So recursive should go before evolving, right? Fifth point, complementarity. You can project that, Renee, if you want. Complementarity means mind and body go together. We shouldn't say body anymore, and we shouldn't say mind anymore by itself. Just like we shouldn't say space or time separately. Space-time are one thing. Body-mind are one thing. Waves, particles are one thing. Organism, environment are one thing. Just two different aspects of the same thing. So complementarity simply means two aspects of the same underlying reality. And what is the same underlying reality? Being, consciousness. Being. Creative interactivity. Creative interactivity means that one cell, remember, when you were conceived, that was just one cell. So how do we refer to that one cell? We refer to that one cell as, of course, simple terms. It's the fertilized egg, right? 300 million sperm trying to get to one egg, because guys don't like to stop for directions. Okay? But in any case, one cell, it divides into two. How? By interacting with its own self. And then two divide and become four. It takes only 50 replications to make 100 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So this process of one cell, one self, one awareness, interacting with itself to produce the 100 trillion cells, which, as I said, is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. That's pretty astonishing. Okay, so this is a process which we call creative interactivity. Or you can even say sentience. Sentience is to know and be alive and to creatively express your oneness into diversity. Because finally, when the body is formed, the liver cell looks very different from the brain cell, which looks very different from the stomach cell, the heart cell, the bone cells, the cells of your fingernails or hair follicles or genitalia, still that one cell. So this should tell you something, and that is that in the deeper reality, there's only one consciousness appearing as all these different ways of experiencing, different knowers, different modes of knowing, different objects known, all from that. You can't actually divide consciousness or multiply it, because one. But it creatively interacts with itself to create not only your body, you will see ultimately the entire universe. Okay. And for us, what we call the human universe. And then the last point here is spontaneous and effortless. You know, it was so effortless that you didn't have to do anything. Your being, your consciousness orchestrated the whole thing. And while it did that, it remembered and learned from 13.8 billion years of cosmic evolution. So I would like to suggest to you that these 7 universal principles should become our life. If your life involves effort, hard work, driving ambition, exacting plans, then you're violating universal principles. Being is the highest intelligence. Once again, being is the highest intelligence. What do you have to do to be? Anyone? Nothing. Nothing. So, being is the highest intelligence. In being, all happens spontaneously and effortlessly. In being, there is self-organization, self-regulation, recursion, evolution, complementarity, creative interactivity, spontaneous, effortless manifestation. So when we interfere with being, that experience is called stress. Okay. Because of habits of conditioning. And unfortunately, thousands of years of conditioning. Thousands of years of conditioning. By religion, by history, by tribal identity, by economics, by stories we heard since the day we were born. Okay, because when you were born, you were a perfect expression of being. So, once again, being is the highest intelligence. The meditation that you're doing is to allow yourself to settle into being, to settle into restful awareness. That's the value of meditation. But you can settle into being at any moment. So let me ask you right now, to just turn your attention. You don't even have to turn, just be aware this moment of who's listening to this lecture. That's being. It's not a thought. A thought arises in being and then subsides in being. It's not even a feeling. A feeling arises in being, then settles in being. It's not a perception. Perception arises in being and settles in being. So we can say very clearly, all experiences are in time, but being is not in time. Being was there all along, before even the universe came into existence. Being is not in time. It experiences itself in time. So let me try something else, easy. This is a technique that many other teachers use as well, of non-dual awareness, Rupert Spira, many others, Dan Siegel. So I'm going to ask you just now a question, and the question, I'm going to pose a question, are you aware? And please oblige me by saying yes, because of course you're aware, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this lecture. So, are you aware? Once again, are you aware? Okay, now I'm going to ask you the same question, but don't answer it till I raise my hand. Are you aware? So, are you aware is a thought. Yes is a thought. In between is you, being. Being is in the gap between every experience, whether the experience is a thought, or a feeling, or an emotion, or a perception. Okay? Being is always there. This experience, that experience, that experience, that experience, but being is there. So experience is in time, being is not in time. So once again, if you want to heal yourself, then settle into being. Make that your identity, because it spontaneously is doing everything anyway. It has been for billions of years. Okay? And this is all the research shows. That's why meditation changes everything, changes your biology, changes your telomerase, on and on. Okay, so what's the second highest intelligence? the second. So again, once again, being is the highest intelligence. You can also rephrase that. It's to be silently witnessing your own self without judging yourself is the highest intelligence, is the highest healing. To be silently witnessing your own self or everything else without judgment, without evaluation, without labels, without descriptions, without definitions, just silent witnessing. If you can make that a habit as much as possible, when you break the habit, you can ask yourself, am I aware? Then you will not feel any stress. Your mind will be quiet, except when you need it. You should only use the mind when you need it. Otherwise, it's a distraction. So this is highest. What's second highest? Second highest is feeling. You know, when we are in any situation, we feel. Before thought arises, we feel. If we feel connected, then we feel things that we call label. Love, compassion, joy, empathy, peace. If we feel connected. If we don't feel connected, then we feel fear and hostility and anger and guilt and shame and depression. Just disconnect, okay? So we would say that the second highest level of intelligence after being is feeling connected. Feeling connected spontaneously creates joy. Spontaneously creates the experience of love and compassion and empathy and peace and equanimity. These are called divine emotions in the traditions of wisdom that we relate to from the East, Buddhism and Vedanta, but of course they're part of every spiritual tradition. Second highest level. Third highest level of intelligence is what we call thinking, but thinking not in a dogmatic way, thinking in a way that is reflective. Everyone's learned meditation, right? Already? Yes? Primordial sound. So we start with those 4 questions. Who am I? What do I want? What's my purpose? What am I grateful for? That's the highest level of thinking. Highest level of thinking. No dogma, no opinion, just reflection. And because consciousness is a field of all possibilities, your awareness is a field of all possibilities, it will give you the answers when you need them. You don't have to think about the answers. You just leave it up to the self to reveal the answers. And the answers will change as your life evolves, right? So what do I want? Could be I want a new house. Or it could be I want enlightenment. But it depends. Whatever comes to you in your state of evolution is okay. So reflective thinking. There are other questions you can ask if you want, but those are the most important questions that we said. Who am I? What do I want? What's my purpose? What am I grateful for? Now, if you want to create what is called a soul profile, here are some other questions that you can add on a daily basis, not necessarily to your meditation, but as part of your identity, okay? So here we go. This is how to create your own soul profile. What makes me joyful? Remember, you don't have to look for answers. If you live the questions, yourself will give you the answers. And how does yourself give you the answers? Either through a situation or a coincidence or a synchronicity or a relationship or sudden epiphany, insight, creative opportunity, good luck, all of those things. Okay, live the questions only. So what makes me joyful? Can I remember any experiences in my life where I felt ecstatic? Those are core moments that we call peak experiences. What are my peak experiences? If I can anchor myself to that. What is what do I look for in a meaningful relationship? What kind of relationship nurtures me, makes me evolve, makes me feel whole? Do I have any role models or heroes or heroines in history, mythology, religion? Who are my role models? Because, if you study the lives of great people, they always had somebody that they looked up to, either in history, mythology, or religion. What do I offer to others in my relationships with them? What are my unique strengths and talents? How do they make a difference in the world? What will be my contribution to the world? We could go on and on. What kind of world do I want to live in? How does what I do every day make a difference in the world? So you see that the more we ask ourselves these questions, what does it do? It expands our awareness. Okay, we don't need, as I said, to know the answers. Okay, this is then, we say, the third highest level of intelligence. The fourth highest level of intelligence is speaking. And we must be, in a way, more aware of how we speak. Perhaps we can ask ourselves before we speak if it's necessary. Or is it going to make a difference to anyone? Is it kind? Is it compassionate? Is it healing? In the Vedanta they say the purpose of speech is to create bliss in the listener. So if your speech is not going to help, let it go. And so the final level of intelligence is action, the least effective. But action which is grounded in these other levels of being, feeling, reflecting, speaking, and doing, so doing is the last, that is very effective. Okay, but otherwise action cannot be that effective, even good actions. Because action without love is meaningless, and love without action is irrelevant. They go together in that. Now, in the tradition of the Vedanta and the yoga, this is yoga. Okay, this is the real meaning of yoga. Yoga means union, yuj, connection with source. So the yoga, you can project that slide if you want. Renee always has slides for everything I say. So being is Raj Yoga. It's called the royal yoga because it's the highest intelligence. Feeling is called Bhakti Yoga. thinking, by the way, we should just change the word thinking to reflecting. Gyan Yoga. And then doing is Karma Yoga. Between thinking and doing is speaking, because speaking proceeds in many ways. Speaking internally in your own mind. Speaking precedes doing. Okay. If we can then, based on this, we can then create the roadmap for healing. The word healing is the same as the word holy. Healing, holy, wholeness, all of them mean the same thing. So healing is the return of the memory of wholeness. And what is wholeness? Being. Being includes everything. It's being that through creative interactivity becomes all these other aspects of itself. Okay, maybe we can go back to the slides where the future well-being. Okay, maybe I'll handle this, Renee. Okay, so now getting a little practical. Although everything I said is practical, also. So these are the three templates on which our body is built. Remember the genome, which means your genes, which you got from your parents. The second part is called the microbiome. This afternoon, with Dr. Rob Knight, we will go into great details about the microbiome. So what is the microbiome? It's microbiome, the second part of your biology, which is bacterial microorganisms. So what happens is, during the 9 months that you're in your mother's womb, there's no bacteria in your life. Okay, but as you begin to exit through the birth canal, as the baby exits the birth canal, the womb through the birth canal, as you saw in that video, it inhales, it swallows, and it is covered by the vaginal secretions of its mother. So it actually swallows the vaginal secretions, and as a result of that, there's an inoculation of bacteria in the entire gastrointestinal tract. But it also inhales them. So there's inoculation of bacteria in the lungs. But it's also covered by them, so there's inoculation of bacteria in the skin. And how many genes do these bacteria contribute? 2 million. So although you have 23,000 human genes, you have 2 million plus bacterial genes at the moment you're born. Okay, and these days, by the way, when maybe we can ask Dr. Knight this afternoon, but these days good obstetricians, if they do a C-section, they take the mother's secretions and they cover the baby, they massage the baby with the mother's vaginal secretions. They even make it inhale and swallow. Because these, after all, are contributing more to our body's intelligence than what our parents gave us. So what are these bacteria? These are the bacteria of the earth, of the soil, the entire planet. Now, unfortunately, because of the misuse of antibiotics and fertilizers and chemicals in our food chain, I'm told that 30% of the microbiome in Western societies has disappeared. You have to go to the Amazon to find the full microbiome or other places. And many people feel, and we'll learn more about it this afternoon, that many of the modern epidemics we have are a result of what is called dysbiosis, unhealthy microbiome, not the ecosystem of the earth, of which we are recycling earth. We are also recycling stardust. So microbiome is a very important component, and we'll see its health. And then a third component, which is called the epigenome. What is the epigenome? The word epi means above. So the epigenome is a sheath of proteins that is right above the genes. I'll show you a picture. And these proteins come about as a result of the interaction between the microbiome and the genome as a result of new experiences. So now the baby is in the world, and if there are siblings, they may be touching it, the mother is breastfeeding it, maybe kissing it, and cuddling and touching and cooing, and then, there's many members in the family, and so this creates an interaction between the genome and the epigenome, between the genome and the microbiome, these experiences that result in this sheath of proteins called the epigenome, which in turn regulates the activity of the microbiome and the genome. So it's all, again, creative self-regulation. You don't have to do anything to do this. It's happening all by itself. Okay, and so what are the experiences we have? We have these experiences: sound, touch, sight, taste, smell. So this is a good way of understanding a term I'm going to introduce to you called qualia. Qualia means quality of experience. Sound is a quality of experience. Touch is a quality of experience. Seeing, color, form is a quality of experience. Taste, smell. So these are all the experiences now that in a 24-hour period you can see this is what has happening. Sleep, waking, breathing, nutrition, metabolism, environment, nature, universe. And then there's all this stuff that no one else can see, but you know that you're experiencing. Thoughts, emotions, memories, desire, imagination, creativity. As a baby, you don't have time to introspect, but later, intuition and higher states of consciousness, which we may have time to discuss. And then everything we call reality, okay? Nature, universe. So all this is regulating your genes, epigenes, and microbiome. And so we can say we metabolize experience. We are conscious beings that are constantly having experiences, and then we kind of think about those experiences, we choose new experiences. So again, in Eastern wisdom traditions, this is called the cycle of karma. Karma means experience, memory, and experience again through desire. Karma, memory, and desire. This is our soul's journey through cosmic time. And if these experiences are holistic, so instead of listening to the siren of the ambulance or the fire truck, I'm listening to music. Different, right? The experience is different in the body. Or the experience of listening to mantras instead of gunshots. Every experience we have is metabolized into what we call our body. Actually, at the deepest level, maybe by tomorrow, you should get rid of the notion that you have a body. There's no such thing. It's just a continuous, ceaseless activity of being as these activities. You don't have the same body you had as a baby or a teenager. So body is just another experience, okay? Like this experience, or the experience of this room, your body is an experience. Where is that experience happening? In you. The experience is in time, but you are not in time. But in order to feel healthy, you want the experience to be joyful. That's why at the end of our meditation we introduce these 4 intentions, right? Actually, a meditation in its complete form covers everything that I'm talking about. Okay, joyful, energetic body, loving, compassionate heart, reflective, alert mind, and lightness of being. Lightness of being means no anticipation, no resistance, no burden by memory, just this moment as it is. And of course, this is what is interfering with this, right? What we call stress. Stress is just a perception, a self-induced perception of threat. Okay, when I say self, it also means, conditioning. If your parents were stressed, you'll be stressed. If you're especially in the beginning of life, all the things that happen in childhood, in the first 3-4 years of life, they condition our emotional intelligence for the rest of our life. So by the time you're 3 or 4 years of age, conditioning has happened, and by the time one is 8 years, it's kind of fixed. But we can change it. That's why we're here. We are changing it through the practices that you're learning about this week, through with Dr. Suhas and all the other doctors, Sheila Patel, all the other people we've invited. You're changing your conditioning, because nothing is fixed. Consciousness is always a field of possibilities. But nevertheless, stress is the epidemic of our time, which is the perception of physical or emotional threat. At least that's the definition we have in biology. A better definition of stress would anything that interferes with the spontaneity and effortlessness of the self. Anything that interferes with the spontaneity and effortlessness of the self, of being, is stress. So we have all these components of stress: time sickness, not having enough time, multitasking. Now your being, your consciousness, your awareness is already multitasking. For example, right now your being is regulating your blood pressure, your heart rate, your autonomic nervous system, hormones, your body temperature. You're not doing anything. The most important things are happening by themselves. Your being is doing that. The conscious mind cannot multitask. So if you think you are multitasking consciously, you're not. You're just moving from one thing to another very fast. And when you do that, you will create stress for yourself. Okay? So if you're checking your phone and you're speaking to me at the same time, you're doing neither. Okay? If you're minding your children and thinking of something else, you're not doing. So this is why these days, what is called mindfulness has become so popular. Do one thing and do it with focused awareness. So if you do that, you won't have performance anxiety, you won't have confusion, you won't have lapses of memory, or all these things that stress causes on a mental, emotional level. Mental stress leads to behavioral disturbances like drug and alcohol abuse, eating disorders, sleep disruption, restless behavior, aggression, hostility, fear, phobias, and ultimately destroys our relationships, both personal and relational, personal and professional, affects our career, ultimately results in disease. So everything from minor skin disruptions to muscle aches and pains, to gastrointestinal disorders, to cardiovascular headaches and inflammation, blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, endocrine, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, insulin resistance, immune dysfunction, immunity getting decreased, increased risk of infection, cancer, autoimmune diseases, lung problems, all starts with stress. Now here's something which is new information, and I think you should all have it, because most people, even doctors, don't know this. Only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant. I'll repeat that sentence. It's very precise. Only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant. So first of all, what's a mutation? A mutation is an error. Okay, so I told you in the beginning, think of DNA as the letters, genes as the words, and then, sentences and stories and epics and all of that. So think of a gene mutation as a typo, as a spelling mistake. So the word is misspelled. The alphabet, maybe T should have come in this particular gene before C, and it was reversed. CT instead of TC. Okay, so there's a mistake. So these mistakes can cause disease because they spin out an abnormal protein. However, what scientists are finding, only 5% of these genetic errors guarantee the disease, which means there's a 1-to-1 ratio correspondence between the mutation and the disease. So there are some that we know that everybody in the general public knows about them. BRCA gene, for example, for breast cancer, means that that person is going to get breast cancer. So they need to get a mastectomy preventively. Hopefully not in the future, because as research gets better and better, one can block that gene. But right now we can't. Okay. Similarly, for all other cancers, in fact, it's less than 5% of these genetic errors that cause or guarantee the disease, which is very good news. It means 95% of genetic errors are influenced by lifestyle. And when I say lifestyle, it's all those things I mentioned and a couple more. So that's the good news. Now, one of the biggest epidemics right now as people grow older is what they call Alzheimer's disease. So they say that after the age of 80, almost everybody is prone to Alzheimer's. But of the genes that cause Alzheimer's, genetic errors that cause Alzheimer's, only 3% guarantee the disease. So you don't have to get Alzheimer's. Similarly with cancer, most of the genetic errors that make you predisposed to cancer are not fully penetrant. So this is important for us to know. Okay, so these are the 6 pillars in addition to what I've told you so far that are really important, okay? Sleep, meditation and stress management, movement, at least 10,000 steps a day. One should make it a point to move 10,000. And for us here, very important, yoga and pranayama, because these add to what we call, remember we said mind and body are one unit. We shouldn't think of them as separate. So yoga and pranayama, breathing techniques, they fortify or strengthen this mind-body coordination. Healthy emotions, which we mentioned, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, empathy. Nutrition. So, when I was in medical school, and most doctors who get training even today, they learn very little about nutrition. And again, tomorrow afternoon we have Mark Hyman, and it'll be very interesting to see his latest understanding on nutrition. But, when even I was training in medicine, somebody said, I'm going to change my diet to help treat my cancer. Doctors would laugh. What does diet have to do with that? Or, to help heal my asthma or arthritis, people would laugh. But no more. And why? Because what happens to food when you put it inside your body? The first thing it comes across is these genes in your gut, what we call the microbiome. These are genes. Okay, they're as important as, if not more important, than the genes you got from your parents. So if your food contains toxins, if your food contains petroleum products, which is all insecticides and pesticides, if your food comes from a factory and contains chemicals, animals that are basically created in factories for consumption, they get antibiotics, they get hormones, they get growth hormone, they get all kinds of chemicals that basically you ingest when you eat those animals. So I'm not saying everybody should be a vegetarian, although plant-based diet is more healthy. But if you're going to consume animal food, then get it from something like a farmer's market and not from a factory. Okay, because factory-produced animals are full of chemicals, inflammatory products, basically petroleum products. This is like putting Agent Orange in your food and then expecting to be healthy. So that messes up the microbiome, which then messes up the other interactions between genes and epigenes. So nourishment, and then balancing our biological rhythms. Now I see that a lot of people are using grounding mats, etc., and that's very good, but to take a walk on the grass or to take a walk on the beach has very powerful grounding effects that these devices also can now replicate. There are many rhythms, circadian rhythms, as the earth spins on its axis. So I just came back from Israel directly to Philadelphia, and from Philadelphia directly here in 3 days. But even within those 3 days, I made sure to go out, experience the sunlight, to make sure I got good sleep, etc. Because our biological rhythms are the rhythms of the universe. Okay, circadian rhythm is the earth spinning on its own axis. Seasonal rhythm is the earth going around the sun. Lunar rhythms is the rhythm that occurs as a result of the sun and the moon and the earth, their relationship to each other. And tidal rhythms is the gravitational effects on the tides, but we have an ocean inside us, the same as the ocean outside us. And so our body responds to those rhythms. What the interesting thing is, if you reset one rhythm, you affect all the other rhythms. So if you reset your circadian rhythm, then you will affect other rhythms. I just met with somebody, some company now, that they're designing microchips for lights. These lights are not the healthiest lights in the world, the ones we are with now. Okay, they're not the full spectrum of sunlight, which basically gave us birth. We are all beings of light, originally from the stars and the sun. So these days, and I'm a big fan of technology because if it's used right. So they are creating microchips in the light that will replicate the cycle of the sun, which would be amazing for treating jet lag and many other disorders. Okay, so let's go over these things in detail now. Sleep is the most efficient way to improve your health. During sleep, you remove toxins, you create order from chaos, you renew your body, you fine-tune your immune system, your memory gets sharper, because memory is contained in being. And in the sleep state, you return to being. Right? First, there's, of course, sleep state has two levels, right? Dream sleep and deep sleep. So, in dream sleep, the excitations of consciousness are different from the excitations of consciousness in this moment. Okay, in this moment, which is we call waking state, the excitations of consciousness are in a sense more dense. In dream state they get fine, and in deep sleep the excitations disappear. The vrittis, as they call them in Sanskrit, they disappear. So in deep sleep you return to your soul, to your being. And that's why when the next day you wake up, you pick up from where you left, because memory is still there, but you say, I've slept like a baby. You feel fresh, because you go to the same place where babies come from, which is self. Okay, so sleep is a spiritual experience. Of course, not induced by artificial substances. In sleep also, there is what they call unconscious processing and creativity. So you can ask yourself a question, and many times in the morning you'll have the answer. Okay, you can ask a question. You can also expand your creativity. The unconscious processing means that the processing of information is happening without your conscious mind being aware of it. So we can say that in deep sleep, there's no perception, there's no thinking, but there is awareness. Awareness never goes to sleep, even in death. Why? Why can we say this? Certainly, because awareness is not in time. Only experience is in time. So awareness never sleeps. We can interfere with the quality of awareness, but awareness is always there. It's eternal. Eternal not doesn't mean stretching endlessly in time, it means not in time altogether. That's why, again, in spiritual traditions they say soul is immortal. Okay? It's not subject to birth and death. Talk about it more tomorrow. But here are some of the other practical things. So all the hormones get self-regulated in sleep, and especially those that influence metabolism. So actually one of the best ways to lose weight is make sure you get 8 hours of sleep every day, without interference. Reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes, overall risk of death. Actually, now we know that all the risk factors for diabetes, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, also apply to other diseases, okay, to cancer, to heart, everything. The common background is inflammation. So, if you can practice meditation and get good sleep every day, you will amplify the effects of healing. Most powerful thing. Okay, here are some studies that you'll be glad to know about. These are studies that we did in the year 2013, but it took us 3 years to get them published. SOS stands for Seduction of Spirit, which is the other course we do. And so Elizabeth Blackburn is a Nobel laureate, and she's the one that we first approached, along with Alyssa, who's works with her colleague. Rudy Tanzi, who's my colleague, helped me. We both wrote Super Genes and Super Brain. He's a professor at Harvard. Eric Schott, Mount Sinai. And then, our own people here at UCSD Medical School. And then here at the center, Sheila Patel. What we found was during the course, within 5 days, the enzyme telomerase went up by 40%. What's telomerase? It's the enzyme that controls the length of our chromosomes. Chromosomes are like these ladders where the genes are housed. So as we grow older, our chromosome gets shorter, this part of the chromosome called the telomere. And there's a mechanism there for biological death. Okay, so everyone has to die sometime. And that genetic program is there in the genes. And you say, why does everyone have to die? Because the soul wants to renew itself, recursion and evolution. So we're speaking of how we think in the Vedantic tradition. So the enzyme went up 40%. Actually now, based on this and many other studies, Elizabeth and Alyssa have written this book, The Telomere Effect, which was recently on the New York Times bestseller list as well. It mentions our study. In other words, during meditation, this course in 5 days, biological age reversed very significantly, 40% in just that 1 week. And so this was published in the journal Translational Psychiatry, which is a journal, one of the journals of Nature, which is a very high impact journal. Vacation means vacation here, right now. You know, a retreat, it doesn't mean being in the bar at 3 in the morning. Okay. Like a vacation retreat with meditation. And this was published and it has made headlines all over the world. And then here's the modeling of the genes. Okay, so you can see in your genes are activities that are speaking to each other based on the experiences you're having. Right now, all your genes are speaking to each other. And so genes can be in a state which restores well-being, or they can move to a disease state. And this kind of modeling helps scientists to predict models. So in the very near future, medicine, the way it's practiced, will be very precise, very predictable, preventable, process-oriented, and participatory, which means we'll be participating in understand. Even today, people can, it's not enough to get genes analysis. The next step is which genes are active and which genes are not active. Okay, that's what matters more than anything else. So once again, here's the modeling of the genes. Genes are speaking to each other. Your body is just an activity in your consciousness. You see, and as they speak to each other, they release these ultimately these transmitters, these chemicals, which are basically just, you know, the markers. You can say that the biology is just the signature of what is happening in consciousness. Okay, so this is the same paper. It got a lot of attention. Here's something more. You'll see that in this 1 week of that course, Seduction of Spirit, the genes that regulate homeostasis, which means self-regulation, they go up. Some of them 17 times over baseline. And the genes that cause susceptibility to disease, including heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's. As I mentioned, the risk factors for heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's are also the risk factors for other diseases. They went down. So actually, Dr. Schott and the other scientists who were involved, they said just by looking at somebody's blood sample, they can tell whether this person is a meditator or not, or is practicing meditation or not. That's pretty neat. We couldn't have done that even 5 years ago. So this is now what we call the science of epigenetics. Again, don't need to go into all the chemical details. For those who are interested, they can pursue it. But those blue balls that you see, those are called histones, and these are proteins around which the genes are wrapped. So you know the spiral that you see, that's your genes, that's your chromosome, and it's wrapped around these blue balls or proteins. And every experience you have, you know, think of if I make a fist right now, that my genes are wrapped around these proteins. And then, I can move my fist in different ways. So some genes come closer, some get further apart. And that's how the epigenes, or the proteins, regulate which genes get active and which genes don't. So if you suddenly cringe in fear, then the genes, there'll be distortion of those proteins, which will activate genes that obviously cause stress and inflammation. If you're in meditation or you fall in love, that's a different story, and that will cause different genes to be activated. Very precise. No more guessing games, 30 years ago when I spoke about this, it was just kind of intuitive, but now it's very precisely measurable. Okay, so now what you see in this particular diagram is a nerve that's coming from your midbrain. It's called the vagus nerve. Vagus is related to the English word vagabond, because this vagus nerve, which you have two of them, they're coming from your midbrain, and the first thing they do is they branch off and they go into your facial muscles, and they even affect your facial, what is called microcirculation. So that's why when you look at somebody, you can see if they're happy or they're sad or they're depressed, because the face is just the icon, or you might say the signature of what's happening in consciousness. A face tells a lifetime of stories, a lifetime of relationships, a lifetime of emotions, a lifetime of experience that's in your face right now. Your brain and your vagus nerve are just the signatures of a deeper consciousness, what's happening in your life right now. Okay, so they influence our facial expressions. And by the way, now we will soon have technologies that can do facial recognition and give you a little bit of feedback and whether you're good, feeling good or not. Not that you need to know, but it's good to get that feedback. Or good to look at a mirror once in a while and see what is this face saying, okay, about you at this moment. Which reminds me, there's an app that we have here that I co-founded with Punacha, who's the CEO, Punacha Machaya. It's called Jio, J-I-Y-O, and we're encouraging people to post welfies over there instead of selfies. Okay, and then everybody shares their welfies, moments of joy. So you reinforce well-being. Face tells a lot. What else tells a lot? Eyes tell a lot. Okay, what else? The tone of your voice. The vagus nerve influences the tone of your voice. Is it anxious? Is it stressed? Is it friendly? Is it aggressive? So facial expressions, eye movements, tone of voice, body language, gestures. Any baby can tell this by looking at its mother. Okay, but afterwards, it gets complicated. So vagus nerve then goes from there to your heart and lungs, where it regulates your breathing and it regulates your heart rate variability, which is called HRV. Heart rate variability is the finest way to detect if somebody is stressed or not, or if they are healthy or not. Okay, or there are technologies available right now, and we can speak more of them. But heart rate variability, and then from there, the vagus nerve, remember it's called the vagabond, so it goes through the diaphragm, it goes to all the organs in your body, and then it causes self-regulation in all the organs in your body. It finally goes through the intestines and the stomach, and it influences the gut microbiome as well, which then feeds back through various chemicals, information into your brain where it affects your mood, your cognition, which means mental processing and emotion. So it's all one system, okay? And why am I showing this particular slide? Because when you do yoga, this is the nerve that you stimulate. Okay, so even doing a few sun salutations or cat-cow or deep breathing will influence the vagus nerve. And so you can stop anytime and do something simple, like taking, sit down, take a deep breath to the count of 4, and then pause just for a second or so, and then count deep breath 6. If you do that, deep breath in 4, pause, count out 6, your breathing will first of all get deeper. Secondly, your breathing rate will drop from 14 to about 8. Thirdly, it will stimulate the vagus nerve, which is basically causing self-regulation into your entire body, at every level, all the organs, including right down to the microbiome. So take a breathing break with that formula, 4, 2, 6. So 4 on the inhale, 2 pause, 6 exhale. Then as you get a little better at it, combine that with things like ujjayi breathing, and hopefully somebody will tell you what ujjayi breathing is if you already don't know. Here's another study done from our institute, published in Columbia University Journal. Gratitude. So just asking yourself, what am I grateful for? In this particular case, people kept a journal. Every night they would write down what they were grateful for, and all the inflammatory markers went down. These are patients with chronic heart failure. So you should ask, which surgery can do this? There's no drug that will do this. And this is another study published in Nature Scientific Reports about, not only just meditation, but yoga and breathing and following a good diet and sleep, all the things we are saying, what that did to the metabolites in our body. So there are trillions of metabolites in our body, and believe it or not, we are studying all of those. Your entire body changes. Okay, now we enter the field of biofield science, and after this I'll stop and I'll continue. Okay, so biofield, to give you a little bit of information on biofield. Your body, every cell of every living organism, it emanates an electromagnetic field, which is what we do when we're looking at an electrocardiogram or ECG or a brain wave. We're in a way measuring the electromagnetic field of the body. Your body radiates an electromagnetic field which can be picked up easily 8 feet from where you are. But of course it ripples across space and time. But we can pick it up about 8 feet. And it turns out your biofield is actually, in a way, reflecting your state of consciousness. So if you're upset, if you're stressed, then the biofield will be not coherent, which means chaotic, not harmonious. And it affects other people's biofield. Okay, because we are all sitting in this room, but even if you're not, people outside, we're all connected at the level of the electromagnetic field. That's why you can send somebody a text message or email through wireless, right? You're using the field, the electromagnetic field, which you are a part of. So the way you feel affects other people, and the way other people feel affects you. Now there are ways of measuring it. There are many different ways of measuring it. In many ways, by these earthing devices, you're connecting to the field of the earth as well. So these are 2 papers. One talks about the physics of the biofield, which I wrote with Menas Kafatos, who's a physicist, my co-author in You Are the Universe. And then this is another one with Shamini Jain on the biology of the biofield. But there are now devices that we will be soon introducing that you'll know about that can measure biofield very simply by just you're putting your hands, fingers in a little what is called a bio well, and it can tell you very precisely what's happening in your body. Okay, and then of course we did studies with scripts here locally on, these are also published, and these show that within seconds of meditation, your biofield is changing in a good direction. Again, these are studies that have always... Now I'll finish with this. Since we are all connected, your biofield even affects the genes of other species. How many people have a cat or a dog in the house? You know how you feel affects the dog, right? Or vice versa. There's a relationship, even though you have two different species, but consciousness is still one. So this was a study that was published in what is called a optogenic cell implant, where the genes of a mouse were kept in a test tube, and people meditated around the test tube, and the good genes went up in their activity in the mouse in the test tube. Okay, so again, a good example of how we are all connected at the deepest level. Mind-controlled transgene expression by a wireless-powered optogenic cell implant. Okay, so beyond our usual states of consciousness, we have this to look forward to, higher states of consciousness, which we can talk about later. But I will stop here for today. And then I'll be back in the afternoon with Dr. Rob Knight. Now you have a background on microbiome, so we can learn more from him. And then we'll keep going on. You have a lot to look forward to with Dr. Suhas and Sheila and everybody else. Dan Vicario, I think he's here, our oncologist, cancer specialist. So thank you once again for being here. Thank you.